Hi there, this is the JupyterLab weekly dev meeting, and it's July 1st, 2016. Go ahead, Jason.
I was still muted, never mind. Let's start off with quick status reports and then anything we need to talk about. So I've been working a lot on the IPy widgets. Sylvan and I sat down and reviewed it, and we are this close to merging it in. And then I'll work on getting the widgets working with JupyterLab. So one thing I think we should talk about is, Steve, if you could give us an update on what you're planning on doing with the third-party stuff. I know you've switched approaches, and anyway, I'm about ready to start working on the widgets and the third-party stuff. Darian, you want to go? Are you ready? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I have been working all week on refactoring, testing, and changing the behavior of text completion. And the widget is a lot more hardened now than before. A lot of the edge cases are now covered. Almost all the code is covered, but I just did a big refactor yesterday that will require rewriting or adding some new tests, not rewriting some. There was an outstanding issue open about what the behavior of the tab key should be, and now we have the first time you tab, if it happens to be the case that every item in every choice of tab completion is begins with a common substring, then it fills in your text up to that substring. If you should hit tab again, whatever item you have selected becomes your choice. There are a couple other behaviors that are going to change. One is that the completion widget is going to get an anchor element. Before, we used to have this reference semantic parent element, but that's not actually what we care about. All we care about is the scrollable node which we want to anchor it to. So I've changed the name of that, I've changed the behavior of that, and I'm working on tying the scroll event to that anchor scroll top to make sure you can scroll and keep the completion widget up. There were some edge cases that are kind of maybe tedious to get into now. But anyway, there were some things that have been resolved. If you're curious, you can look at the PR. That's outstanding. One thing that came up today, actually, that Steve and I spent a while discussing, and this is not for immediate implementation either on the client or on the back end. But one thing that came up is that suppose I am in a cell and I say from IPyWidgets import int slider. And then in that same cell, I go to the next line and say x equals int slider. I want to create a new instance of an int slider. Right now, what the current notebook does is, in addition to getting kernel API responses for completions, it also manually tokenizes everything that's in the code editor. And so it might actually fill that for you because it'll know it's an int slider. That's one of the strings you happen to have in there. But the kernel doesn't actually do that. And the kernel could do that because you send the whole text of the editor to the kernel for completion. So at least there's nothing in theory stopping the kernel from basically compiling that and telling you what you can do with it. The same way my text editor, when I import something, I don't really go through a compile phase. It automatically lets me use it. So as a user of an IDE, I would have thought that was going to work. And that's what I thought. That's why I thought the kernel was asking for multi-line code inputs. But it turns out it's not giving that back. So that's an enhancement that could go into the kernel, and it would be totally API backward compatible. Nobody would notice because it would just be slightly more options. But it's going to require some work. So that's one thing. Brian, you're on mute if you want to.
Yeah. So there's keep going.
Sure. Keep going. Okay. So then the other side of that same coin is the new completion widget does not tokenize what's in the editor. So it's actually not giving you those choices that the front end might have been able to give you before. Right now, it only gives you the choices the kernel does. Now, that's something that I'm going to post an issue and we can solve at some point in the future, or we can decide that the kernel is going to be more supportive or whatever. We can come up with some strategy. What the current notebook does is it's actually manually going through the code editor instance and using this method called getTokenAt. And it does each line multiple, it hits each line and basically builds a list of tokens itself, and then it merges that with, or removes anything in that list that is in the API response as well, and then serves the two separately with the API responses on top so that you'll intuitively know those are from the server and the bottom ones are from the client. Now, we can do something like that, and I don't think that's a bad idea, but I do think that actually if you want to feel like you're in an IDE, your kernel should be giving you all the things that are available to you whenever they become available to you. Anyway.
One difference, hold on. In the current notebook, what you're saying is correct with one modification, and that is the front end completion actually looks through not just the content of that cell, but of all cells. And that's something that the kernel can't do.
Okay, cool. That's useful to know. And that's a case for having both. That's a case for having both an enhancement on the kernel side and also having the tokens on the front end. Now, one thing that I discovered looking at the code mirror code is there is a slightly less inefficient way of getting all the tokens. You can get all the tokens for a line instead of getting individual tokens the way the notebook code currently does. So there's room for making that slightly more efficient, but we're talking about an inherently inefficient thing. And that may be okay. That might be all right with us, or it might turn out to be the case that once we have a kernel that's more productive in what it gives back for completion, it might be that that's good enough. Because actually what you're saying, Brian, is really only sort of relevant, right? Because all the other cells already talked to the same kernel before they stopped being open cells. So
the kernel doesn't have the markdown cells, though. So if you wanted something from a markdown cell.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, I was going to say if you had, well, no, you can only have one editable cell. So actually, right, it's really the non-code cells that the kernel would not know about, but the client would.
No, actually, you may be right that we may. I'm just trying to think through exactly the completions from other cells may be coming through the kernel. Actually, I'd have to look at that. And so it may be that what you're saying that we could implement the kernel token recognition in a given cell and we'd be covered.
Right. Yeah. Actually, it's more than just token recognition, because if I create a new int slider, I really want to know the methods of that. So it's not just enough to know that there's a token called int slider. The kernel actually has to have compiled it to be able to give me more than just the tokens available. It has to import int slider.
Yeah, and just also a bit of background, there has been pretty strong interest in improving the two things. One, the message spec for tab completions to allow kernels to provide more additional information, such as types. So there's interest in improving the message spec part of it, and then obviously improving the default Python kernel's implementation of that to provide that additional information. Will Whitney last summer started to work on that. I'm guessing I think we have an enhancement proposal somewhere that we could bring up to see that stuff. Yeah.
That's cool. That would be great, actually, to have a completion widget that's more like here's a method signature inline instead of just getting that in tooltips or whatever. The other thing is that these can be done in multiple stages, and some of them will be totally backward compatible. So just getting the extra tokens or getting the extra tokens and their submethods or whatever, that can be done in a backward compatible way. It'll just be a longer list of completions. And the metadata that you're talking about obviously would require some sort of release schedule to get, it would deprecate some APIs. So that would be different. But there are multiple tiers that we could hit this at without causing disruption.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see I'm looking for that pull request. Yeah. We can try to dig that up though.
So, but for immediate release, I'm going to finish up this PR without any sort of client-side tokenizing and then create a separate issue for that. Because the completion widget has changed enough that I want people to start using it. I want to get it out of the PR. And this is a story that's containable as a totally separate issue. So that's how I'm tackling it.
Okay. And are you going to need the designers to do a pass on the visual design?
That would be nice. All I did was make it show up in a sane way, and I set its size, and I made it have fixed width because I assume you want this for code. But those are sort of default choices that I made. It really ought to be looked at, but in context. It should be looked at within notebooks and within consoles to make sure that it's not just getting a separate treatment, but that it fits in and looks like it's part of whatever it's inside.
Okay, great.
Great. As a reminder for those that joined, we're running on a time schedule for at least a few of the people today. So thanks, Darian. Chris?
Yeah, so my work update isn't much different than last week. Still taking a few days off and working on making finishing up the final bit of bring the last widget, which is the dock panel, into the Phosphor mono repo. So that work's still ongoing. Hopefully I'll have that done today. My ultimate goal, though, is to have that mono repo ready and JupyterLab running on the new mono repo by the time SciPy hits. So I'll work with Steve on that next week. He's here in Austin next week, so he and I will be working on getting that done before SciPy.
And I've already moved widgets over to the new mono repo, and it works great, so appreciate it. Is Phosphite already in the mono repo?
I'm going to put that in the mono repo too. That'll be part of that. So there'll be some discussions about that that we'll have next week that I'll just rope you guys in on as we need to have them about unifying services and extensions and what we want to do about the type safety of that. Steve brought up a point about yesterday about wanting to use dependency injection, essentially the extension mechanism and its dependency system for reified instances of generic classes. So let's say you have some class that's generic over some type and you want something that provides a concrete version of that, so fully reified to like a vector of ints, for example, just an example of a reified generic. And so how do we spell that out? And so that's something that we'll address. I haven't put full brain cycles into that yet. So the solution may be trivial, it may be not trivial. We'll flesh that out next week.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Steve?
Most of the week spent on streamlining the APIs to be consistent with our patterns document. The new patterns that Chris started in Phosphor that we're mirroring here. Implemented a couple of features that Brian had asked for, including the allowing a plugin to track its widgets in the application, and even in the case of the notebook plugin, expose that so that you can keep track of the active widget and as it changes, and also get a list of all the widgets that are currently in the dock panel at any given time. Also looked at. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Question. So I did a pretty good review of that. I have just one question. What happens when a widget is closed? Does the person who's calling the tracker API need to check if the widgets are disposed?
Getting the list of widgets is intended to be not persisted, so you do something with that list immediately. So
and discard it.
right.
But I guess will a disposed widget automatically be removed from the list?
From the trackers list, but not from the slice that it's handed back to you.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Then honestly, I think that pull request is ready for merge. I did a review of it. I like the API. It's simple. Can I go ahead and merge that now?
Cool. Yes.
I looked at it too, like 80% of the way through, and it looked really good.
Okay. Fantastic. Let me do that.
And the other one was just changes to Phosphide to just temporarily allow us to put content in the top area where that was sort of stubbed out before it wasn't implemented. And then also PR against JupyterLab to allow us to add things similarly to with the same API as adding things to the left panel where you can provide a rank to add things to the top level menu.
Mm-hmm. And then Chris, so right now that API, you actually pass menu items in, is that correct? And those menu items.
Which version? Are we talking about the mono?
This is Phosphor menus. No, Chris, it's an old one.
And I guess I just want to understand sort of how that API will change when we do go to the mono repo.
Okay, so so right now, menu items are independent. In Phosphor menus, it's independent of command because it's a separate repo, and we were trying to make everything reusable, but now that we have or usable independently in its own right. But now that we have the mono repo, it's fine to start reusing some of our own internal concepts within that mono repo. And so in the mono repo, we take the opportunity to unify menu items in menus with commands. And so you still add menu items to a menu, but a menu item is basically just a closure over a command and the arguments for that command. And then the menu looks up all that data to render the menu item from the command registry and the stuff that goes with the commands. And so in the simplest case, a menu item is nothing but a command ID and null if the command takes no args.
Okay, and then, so right now it's the old school menu item where you have to pass an actual function that gets called.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a problem. It'll be an easy transition.
Yep. Right. Yep.
Okay, and then do you think that one is ready for merge?
I think so. Yes. I mean, right now it'll look strange until we actually add something to the top menu because it's just a blank menu there taking up 24 pixels.
The one thing I did comment, Brian, on your post about the Jupyter icon going in there. So the menu items themselves, the thing that's rendered in a menu bar, like the text that's rendered in the menu bar, there's actually an icon node there. So we can set an icon, like let's say the file menu is the leftmost one. We can set an icon on that is the Jupyter icon. And that way when you click on the icon, you actually get a menu that opens up. So it actually does something. And that can be done very, very easily with no extra work. We don't have to add any extra divs or anything like that. The other benefit of that is that let's say we did have some like global application menu that wasn't necessarily file or related or anything like that. You can have a menu item rendered there with no text and just the icon. So if you just wanted an icon menu, like we can do that with the existing menu bar. Of course, we can always add more divs if we want to, but if it's just to add an icon, then I would suggest we just use a menu item icon function.
Great. Sounds good. Okay, let me go ahead and merge it, and we can start to add things to it. So that's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Cool. Yep.
Oops. Sorry, it actually now has conflicts now that I merged the tracker.
Thanks
PR,
a lot, Brian. Okay. And then the last part was I was looking at ways to basically circumvent NPM and not require end users to have NPM if possible when adding new third-party extensions, for example, BQplot, and to see if that was even possible. The first thing I tried was there's a DLL plugin for Webpack where you create the DLL on one end and then there's a DLL reference on the other. But what I found out is that is brittle to the point of even in a patch release, you could break that API. So you'd have extensions that were tied to an exact patch release of JupyterLab. So that's a non-starter. But what we might be able to do is to provide UMD bundles for the things that we want to share, and then at least be able to within a patch release remain in lockstep, so we can use Semver at least to that level between the JupyterLab core and the extensions. So that's what I'll be exploring some next week.
Fantastic.
And that's it for me.
I'm going to have to head out in about 3 minutes. So are there any other questions for me that anybody has, or anything that I should chime in on?
I think that's all I can think of right now.
Okay, in that case, I wish you all
Thanks, Chris.
Friday and weekend. Have a happy
Bye. Happy
Chris.
4th.
Jason, did you already give an update?
I did. We're working on widgets this close to merging. Sylvan and I sat down and reviewed it together. Turns out the code was terrible before, slightly better now. And there's several iterations that we didn't want to put in this sort of big PR of moving the TypeScript that'll follow pretty quickly after we get this TypeScript PR in. Steve, so can you just walk us through this real quick, a little bit more carefully? So I'll construct a UMD bundle and distribute that with my NPM package, and then somehow tell JupyterLab to load this required UMD bundle?
So,
or I know you haven't
it's not fully fleshed out, but yes. So right now, Jupyter.js widgets and Jupyter.js services are both shipping bundles with them. They're AMD, but it doesn't really matter AMD or what format it is from Webpack's perspective. But as long as it's in a format that Webpack can consume as an external, and so the actual closing the loop I haven't done yet, but I believe it's possible. How painful that is remains to be seen.
I believe it's possible to load at runtime from Webpack. Is that right?
I have a question. At the moment in Jupyter.js widgets, we require Jupyter.js services. Do you think that they could be, that we should make it an external thing and also fetch it in the same way?
I will let you know. That's a good first step.
Okay. So like when you have like interdependencies like this, maybe,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Opus and
They can either be served over npm CDN or locally on a script tag.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, I think we're to Cal Poly. Carol, Brian.
Yeah, I don't know. Did the Cal Poly teams want to give a quick update on what you've been working on? You'll definitely have to get close to the microphone. Maybe just go up and grab it and chat. You can sort of just run through a quick outline of the things you're working on right now.
Okay. Yeah. Right now we're just kind of doing a couple little design touch-ups onto some of the older widgets. Well, we were going to put a menu bar into that editor widget, but now there's a better option, where we can have it in the global menu bar. So I think today I'm going to go about adding a few menu bar items that we can put up there in that global menu bar today, just on the widgets that we're working on. I think that seems like the great approach.
Yeah, and we've also been working on turning the About page into kind of more of a tutorial that new users can kind of scroll through and get an overall view of how to use the different aspects of JupyterLab.
Yeah, it's kind of like a walkthrough. It has most of the same information on the current About page. However, it's a little bit more like visual, and it'll actually show users, oh, this is how you actually drag, a tab and place it in another frame in the window. There's more visual stuff like that.
And then I don't know, students, you had dropped off for a second there, but we went ahead and merged Steven's widget tracking PR, and then we're going to merge the menu PR right after this. There's a few merge conflicts that Steven has to clean up first. So both of those will be in master, and you'll be ready to go on the menus and widget tracking.
Cool. I pulled your PR yesterday, and I was playing around with it. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue to get some of that stuff working. I should probably have a PR by lunch for a couple of those things. So.
Could you guys introduce yourselves? At least two that are talking, can you just introduce yourselves real quick so we know your names?
I'm Elliot. Yeah, Elliot.
And I'm Reese.
And I'm Matt. I'm a designer, and then they're developers on the second team, and then the first team. And yeah. Okay. And the other team
has been doing work too.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Farika.
I'm Charmpreet.
Katie. Yeah.
Dorothy.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, so we've been working on the FAQ page, so we're trying to incorporate some commonly asked questions, and it's kind of like an extension on what they're doing and just more help for users.
We were having a little bit of trouble implementing jQuery for it because that's what we were using with the page. Before it was a separate HTML page and we were able to integrate it, but we're having a little trouble with that with the whole application itself right now.
What do you mean?
We don't actually have jQuery on the page yet, Jason. It might. I had given Elliot some code to add it, but it's not actually on master yet.
Okay.
And then yesterday I was with terminal accessors to increase the font, change background color so that I could implement the widget tracking today with that.
Wait to speak up.
Yeah.
So did you? Did I see that there's a bug in the terminal stuff right now? Did you work out that stuff, Charmpreet?
That's what I was referring to yesterday when I was playing around with it, and I was getting a null in the elements.
Right. The terminal was the terminal underlying xterm widget was not widget but object was being created after the WebSocket was open, and so it was null when they were trying to access it. So there's a PR open right now that cleans that up, so that we create the widget but don't populate it or interact with the dimensions of it until such a time as actually the WebSocket's open. So that clears up that issue.
So you can now set the attributes before it's connected.
Right, but any attribute you set that affects the geometry won't actually take effect until it's loaded, until the WebSocket is open, so you can send that information to the back end.
Okay, so like font, you can set font size beforehand, but it's not going to take effect until it all triggers.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I was very confused. I looked at the code with Charmpreet and was like, I think you're setting it correctly. It looks like that's a little odd. Great, thanks so much. I don't know, anything else the students want to mention?
That's where we're at. We're also going to put up what our FAQ page would look like in an issue, and also design for the notebook buttons, because we're planning on changing some of those buttons.
Yeah, and also like adjusting the way it looks, because now that the tabs are white and go right into, there's none of that separation. We're redesigning that menu bar to accommodate for that.
Okay. Great. I guess I haven't given an update. I've mostly just been going in and working with the students and helping them get going with the different things we're working on. We're also setting up basically the organizational side of running user tests at SciPy. So both of the student teams will be running user tests on JupyterLab throughout. Well, which days are you going to do that?
We're sending out an invitation to people, and basically we're just asking them for all their availability, and then we're going to schedule based on what we get for potential participants. So we just are sending them 30-minute time slots, and they can click however they need to, and then we'll schedule it based on that. But there's only there's some stuff at SciPy that all of us want to go to, like talks and things, but for the most part we're flexible, I guess. So we'll just schedule it when we get people's responses.
Okay. So yeah, once they get that announcement ready, the rest of us can sort of help promote that and get people to sign up and interested. We can mention that in our talk about JupyterLab. I can mention it in my keynote, et cetera. So
Awesome.
I think that's all I have.
Cool. Sylvan, you want to give a update?
Yeah, something related to the discussion about making AMD modules that load each other, etc. This morning I was having a conversation with Brian Van Veen, who is the author of Bokeh, and about.
Can you just speak into the mic a little bit more?
Sorry, I was talking to Brian, the author of Bokeh, this morning about how to have some convergence between Bokeh and Jupyter widgets, and in the way we integrate Bokeh in Jupyter. And he said that he wanted to continue using the PyData, CDN, and all. So we maybe we should find or implement a way to generically build a URL for CDN based on the version string and the name of the package. And that would work with both the same thing on NPM CDN and in another way with the version in the name of the package on the CDN of PyData. Since it's not only a Jupyter.js widgets thing, maybe we should think about this at a higher level, like for exposing things like Jupyter.js services and all. PyData? Yeah, there is a PyData CDN. Oh.
Yeah, Sylvan, if you could open an issue on JupyterLab, I think that's a good place for that.
Yeah, okay. So that's it for me. I'm still figuring out my new situation, so it's kind of complicated at the moment.
To say the least. Yep. Yeah. Carol, you want to give an update?
Yeah, thanks again for all the help that the team is giving to the Cal Poly interns. It's much appreciated. I am going to probably towards the end of next week work on still fleshing out that tutorial, whatever things we can add to it to make it a little more user-friendly. And then once we get to SciPy, if you guys want to sit down and map out what you want to do for the sprints, I would be happy to help you do that.
Fantastic.
To make them welcoming. So, but that's it. Have a good weekend.
All right. Sounds good. Anything else that people need to talk about?
I think that's good.
Okay, great.
All right,
see you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.